A wealthy CEO who dumped his contract wife for Mistress on wedding day, but her smile and secret gift destroyed. Heat flashed through Vanessa's chest, but she swallowed the anger. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when her mother was dying. Have you ever been offered something that could change your life but felt too dangerous to accept? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The billionaire tech CEO walked away from his bride at the altar, choosing his mistress over his wife in front of 300 guests and rolling cameras. But when Vanessa smiled instead of crying, everyone knew something deadly was coming. The wedding gift she placed on the altar contained evidence that would destroy his empire and send him to federal prison. Have you ever been betrayed so publicly that the entire world watched? Have you ever smiled when someone expected you to break? Do you know someone who turned humiliation into power? This is what happens when a woman from Detroit decides a Texas billionaire has underestimated her for the last time. Stay with me as we uncover how Vanessa turned the worst day of her life into Ethan's final mistake. Hit that notification bell because this story will change how you see revenge forever. Let me take you back to where this chess game really began. She signed a contract knowing it wasn't love. She just didn't know it would cost her everything she was. The rain hammered Detroit's cracked sidewalks as Vanessa Martinez hurried past abandoned storefronts toward the address that promised to change her life. Her worn sneakers splashed through puddles that reflected neon signs from check-cashing stores and bail bond offices. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where dreams came true, but desperation made unlikely things possible. Her mother's medical bills sat folded in her purse like death sentences written in numbers. Stage for cancer didn't care about payment plans or good intentions. The doctors had been clear: experimental treatment or watch her die. The cost? More money than Vanessa would see in 10 lifetimes of working double shifts at the diner. The matchmaker's office rose from the urban decay like a glass tower in a wasteland. Marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers, and a receptionist's designer dress cost more than Vanessa's monthly rent. Everything here whispered wealth in a language she'd never learned to speak. Ms. Martinez? The matchmaker, Elena Blackwood, glided forward in silk and pearls. Right on time. Please follow me. The conference room overlooked the Detroit River, where cargo ships moved like distant dreams toward better places. Vanessa smoothed her thrift store blazer and tried to look like she belonged among the leather chairs and oil paintings. "You're exactly what he's looking for," Elena said, sliding a thick contract across the mahogany table. Beautiful, intelligent, and most importantly, manageable. The word hit like cold water. Manageable, not independent, not strong, manageable. The gentleman in question is Ethan Caldwell, tech billionaire based in San Francisco. He needs a wife for appearances. Investors prefer family men. You need financial security. It's a business arrangement, nothing more. Vanessa's fingers trembled as she read the terms. 2 years of marriage. Public appearances as needed. Complete discretion about the contract's existence. In exchange, enough money to save her mother's life and set them both up forever. What exactly does he expect from me? Elena's smile turned razor sharp. To be seen, not heard. To smile pretty for the cameras. To make him look respectable. Simple tasks for a simple girl from a simple place. Heat flashed through Vanessa's chest, but she swallowed the anger. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when her mother was dying. "There's one more thing," Elena continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He specifically requested someone untouched. Apparently, he finds innocence appealing." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Vanessa had kept herself pure through high school and college, focused on survival instead of romance. She thought it was strength. Apparently, to Ethan Caldwell, it was just another commodity to be purchased. "I need to think about it." "Your mother doesn't have time for thinking, dear. The treatment starts next week or not at all." Vanessa stared at the contract, each word a chain being forged around her future. But chains could be broken, couldn't they? And money could buy freedom as easily as it bought prisons. She signed her name with steady hands. Even as her heart screamed warnings, she chose to ignore. Excellent, Elena purred, sealing the contract in an envelope marked confidential. He specifically requested someone beautiful but manageable. You fit perfectly. As Vanessa walked back into the Detroit rain, the matchmaker's words echoed in her mind. What exactly had she just agreed to? And why did she feel like she just signed away more than 2 years of her life? Have you ever been offered something that could change your life but felt too dangerous to accept? What would you sacrifice for family? Tell me in the comments. The plane ticket to San Francisco arrived the next morning with a note in elegant handwriting. Looking forward to meeting my investment. Ichi. Investment. Not wife. Not partner. Investment. Vanessa stared at the ticket and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. But her mother was getting treatment, and sometimes survival required selling pieces of your soul to buy time. She just hoped she'd left enough of herself to recognize when a contract ended. The richest man in Silicon Valley was about to meet the one woman who wouldn't bow to his wealth. San Francisco gleamed like a jeweled crown against the Pacific, its glass towers reaching toward clouds that never seemed to rain on the wealthy. Vanessa's taxi climbed through neighborhoods where poverty gave way to prosperity with each ascending block, until they reached the penthouse district where gods lived among mortals. Ethan Caldwell's building stretched 40 floors into the sky, each window reflecting enough light to blind the ordinary world below. The doorman wore a uniform that cost more than Vanessa's entire wardrobe, and the elevator rose so smoothly she felt like she was floating toward judgment. The penthouse doors opened to reveal a man who looked nothing like the photos Elena had shown her. Those pictures captured his wealth, the tailored suits, the confident posture, the practiced smile. They missed the coldness in his pale blue eyes, the way his gaze cut through people like they were obstacles to be moved or assets to be acquired. Ethan Caldwell was handsome in the way that money made men handsome. Perfectly groomed, expensively dressed, and completely hollow. He stood 6 feet tall with dark hair styled to look effortless, but probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. His smile never reached his eyes. "Vanessa Martinez," he said, circling her like a buyer inspecting livestock. "You're more attractive than the photos suggested. That's good. The cameras will love you." His penthouse stretched across half of downtown San Francisco, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the bay like a postcard of power. Modern art hung on walls wide enough to blind, and everything sparkled with the kind of clean that smelled expensive. But Vanessa wasn't looking at the view. She was studying the man who thought he'd bought her. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a leather chair that probably cost more than her mother's medical bills. "Let's discuss your duties." "Duties? Not responsibilities. Duties. This arrangement benefits us both," he continued, moving to the window where the city spread beneath him like a conquered kingdom. "You get security. I get companionship." The way he said companionship made Vanessa's skin crawl. His eyes assessed her body with the same interest he might show a new car, appreciating the features while calculating the value. "Define companionship, Mr. Caldwell." He turned, surprised by her directness. Most women probably melted under his attention like ice cream in summer heat. Vanessa sat straighter, meeting his gaze without flinching. Public appearances, charity events, board meetings where wives are expected. You'll smile, look beautiful, and make me appear stable and family-oriented. In private, his voice dropped lower. You'll be available when I require company. Available. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire that hadn't started burning yet. The contract doesn't mention physical obligations, doesn't it? His smile turned predatory. Read the fine print, sweetheart. All duties expected of a wife. That covers quite a lot of territory. Vanessa's pulse quickened, but not with fear. With anger. He thought she was some desperate girl who'd do anything for money. He wasn't entirely wrong, but he'd underestimated what she was willing to do to survive. "I see." She stood, smoothing her dress with steady hands. "And if I don't find your companionship agreeable, then your mother's treatment stops. Simple as that." The threat hit like ice water, but Vanessa's expression never changed. She'd grown up in Detroit. She knew how to hide fear behind steel. I understand the terms. Good girl. He moved closer, his cologne expensive and suffocating. You'll live here, of course. I've had a room prepared. Your belongings from Detroit will arrive tomorrow. He handed her a black credit card and a set of keys, his fingers lingering on her wrist when she took them. His touch felt like ownership, like he was marking his territory. Everything has a price, Vanessa. Even you. She pulled away smoothly, but her mind was already calculating. If everything had a price, that meant everything could be bought, including freedom, including revenge. Where's my room? Down the hall. Dinner's at 7. Where's something appropriate? His eyes traveled down her body again. Actually, we'll go shopping tomorrow. You'll need a new wardrobe. Can't have my wife looking like she shops at thrift stores. The dismissal stung, but Vanessa forced herself to smile. Of course. Anything else? Yes. He returned to the window, already losing interest now that he'd established dominance. Call me Ethan. We're married, after all, or we will be next month. Have you ever met someone who immediately tried to own you? How did you handle someone who confused wealth with worth? Share your experience below. As Vanessa walked toward her new prison disguised as luxury, she felt his eyes following her. He thought he'd bought a pet. Instead, he'd just purchased his own destruction. He just didn't know it yet. The game was about to begin, and Ethan Caldwell had no idea he was playing against someone who'd learned to survive in a world that tried to kill her daily. He was about to discover that managing Vanessa Martinez was the one thing his money couldn't buy. She came to San Francisco to play wife. She stayed to master the art of war. The designer boutiques of Union Square glittered like jewelry stores, each window displaying clothes that cost more than most people earned in months. Vanessa followed Ethan's personal shopper through stores where assistants recognized wealth by the cut of a man's shirt and the thickness of his credit card. Mr. Caldwell has excellent taste. The shopper, Madison, gushed while pulling dresses from racks. He knows exactly what image he wants to project. Image. Always image. Never substance. Vanessa stood in dressing rooms that were larger than her childhood bedroom, trying on clothes that transformed her from Detroit survivor to Silicon Valley trophy. Each outfit felt like armor, protecting her real self while displaying the version Ethan had purchased. The black cocktail dress fit perfectly, hugging curves she'd hidden under loose clothes her entire life. For the first time, Vanessa understood why men stared when she walked past. She'd never seen herself as beautiful. Survival didn't leave time for mirrors. But reflected in the boutique's perfect lighting, she looked dangerous. Stunning, Madison breathed. You'll be the most photographed woman at the charity gala tonight. The charity gala. Vanessa's first public appearance as Ethan's fiancée. Her debut in a world where everything sparkled, but nothing was real. The Hotel St. Francis Ballroom sparkled with diamonds and deception that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across walls lined with San Francisco's elite. Tech moguls, venture capitalists, and politicians whose smiles hid more secrets than their offshore accounts. Ethan moved through the crowd like a king greeting subjects, one hand possessively placed on Vanessa's lower back. She learned to smile on command, to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, to nod at conversations about yachts and vacation homes while mentally calculating how many families could be fed with the money being discussed. And this must be the lucky lady, said Harrison Webb, a silver-haired venture capitalist whose handshake lingered too long. Ethan's told us so much about you. All good things, I hope, Vanessa replied, her voice sweet as poison honey. He mentioned you're very accommodating. The word hit like a slap. Accommodating, as if she were a hotel service instead of a human being. Vanessa adapts beautifully to any situation, Ethan said, his fingers tightening on her waist. She's exactly what I needed. Needed. Like furniture. Like decoration. Smart man, Veplaukit. Beautiful women are investments that appreciate over time. Unlike stocks, they never crash. The men laughed while Vanessa died inside. She excused herself to the bathroom, needing air that didn't smell like expensive cologne and casual misogyny. The ladies' room offered temporary sanctuary. All marble and gold fixtures where wives and girlfriends repaired their makeup and their dignity. Vanessa stared at her reflection, wondering when she'd become someone she didn't recognize. First time at one of these events? The voice belonged to a woman in her 50s, elegant in the way that money could buy, but suffering couldn't touch. Her diamonds caught the light, but her eyes held shadows that jewelry couldn't hide. Is it that obvious? You still have hope in your eyes. Give it time. The woman applied lipstick with practiced precision. I'm Margaret Chen. My husband owns half the restaurants in the city. Vanessa Martinez. I'm Ethan Caldwell's new acquisition. Yes, I heard. Margaret's smile held no warmth. Word travels fast in our circle, especially when someone young and beautiful appears on the arm of a confirmed bachelor. It's not what everyone thinks, isn't it? Margaret closed her lipstick with a sharp click. Honey, I've been playing this game for 30 years. I know a business arrangement when I see one. The question is, what did you sell to get here? The words hit too close to truth. Vanessa felt exposed, like Margaret could see through the designer dress to the desperate girl underneath. I can see you're wondering if you made the right choice, Margaret continued. Let me save you some time. You didn't, but now you're here, so you might as well learn the rules. What rules? Rule 1. Never trust anything a man like Ethan tells you. Rule 2. Document everything. Rule 3. Always have an exit strategy. Margaret handed her a business card, elegant, expensive, with just a phone number printed in gold. When you're ready to stop being his property and start being your own person, call me. I know lawyers who specialize in difficult divorces. The bathroom door opened, interrupting them as more women entered. Margaret smiled politely and left, but her card burned in Vanessa's palm like a small flame of possibility. Back in the ballroom, Vanessa watched Ethan work the room with renewed clarity. She noticed how he dismissed servers without looking at them, how he interrupted women mid-sentence, how he treated everyone like pieces on a board game he was winning. Having fun, he asked when she rejoined him. Learning, she replied truthfully. Good. Learning your place is important. When did you realize someone saw you as a trophy instead of person? How did that change the way you play the game? Drop your story in the comments. During the drive home, Ethan's phone buzzed with messages he thought she couldn't see. But Vanessa had learned to read upside down in school libraries where books were scarce. The texts were from someone named Isabella, with words that made her stomach clench. Miss you, and can't wait for Miami. And does she know about us yet? As they entered his penthouse, Vanessa realized Margaret Chen was right. She needed an exit strategy. But first, she needed to understand exactly what kind of man she'd married. And judging by those text messages, Ethan Caldwell was hiding more than just arrogance behind his perfect smile. The game was getting more complicated, but Vanessa had been playing survival her entire life. This was just a different board with higher stakes. She was about to discover that knowledge was more valuable than diamonds, and secrets were the best weapons money couldn't buy. The perfect marriage was about to reveal its first fatal flaw. And it wasn't what anyone expected. Living with Ethan felt like being trapped inside a museum where she was both the curator and the main exhibit. Every room in the penthouse gleamed with perfection that couldn't be touched, moved, or changed. Even the air felt controlled, filtered through systems that removed anything messy or real. Vanessa discovered the cameras on her third day. She'd been exploring the penthouse while Ethan attended board meetings, trying to understand the space that was supposed to be her home. The kitchen sparkled with appliances she'd never seen outside magazines, but the refrigerator held only expensive water and takeout containers. The living room showcased art worth more than most houses, but no books, no photos, nothing that revealed who Ethan actually was beneath the wealth. The red light caught her eye while she examined a painting, tiny, blinking, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Then she found another in the bedroom, another in the hallway, another in the bathroom. Her hands shook as she counted them. 12 cameras, watching her eat, sleep, dress, shower, recording her every movement like she was a lab rat in an expensive cage. Find something interesting? Ethan's voice from the doorway made her jump. He stood there in his $1,000 suit, briefcase in hand, watching her discover his surveillance with amusement instead of embarrassment. You're recording me. I'm protecting my investment. He set down his briefcase and loosened his tie like this was a normal conversation about dinner plans. Beautiful women attract attention. I need to know who's paying attention to you. This is illegal. Is it? His smile turned cold. Read your contract again, sweetheart. You agreed to complete transparency in all activities. This is just documentation. The word hit like poison. Documentation. As if her life was a business report to be filed and reviewed. You can't watch me shower. I can watch you do whatever I want. You live in my house, wear my clothes, eat my food. Every breath you take belongs to me now. Heat flashed through Vanessa's chest. Not the warm heat of attraction, but the burning heat of rage. He spoke about ownership like it was romantic, like possession was love. I'm not your property. Aren't you? He moved closer, his presence filling the room like expensive cologne that suffocated instead of attracted. Your mother's treatment, your designer clothes, this penthouse. What do you think it all comes from? You sold yourself, Vanessa. Don't pretend you didn't know what you were buying. The truth hit harder than his words. She had sold herself, but she thought she was selling 2 years of her life, not her entire soul. The cameras stay, he continued, adjusting his cufflinks like they were discussing weather. If you don't like being watched, don't do anything worth watching. That night, Vanessa lay in her bed, not their bed, never their bed, staring at the red light blinking in the corner. She felt more naked under that camera's eye than she ever had without clothes. It watched her cry silently into Egyptian cotton pillowcases that cost more than her old apartment's monthly rent. The next morning brought new rules delivered over breakfast that neither of them ate. No phone calls without my approval. No internet access except through monitored devices. No leaving the building without security escort. Ethan read from a tablet like he was listing grocery items. Your old friend from Detroit might not understand your new lifestyle. It's better to avoid confusion. Confusion. As if her previous life was some embarrassing phase she'd outgrown. What about my mother? Supervised visits twice monthly. She's receiving excellent care. The doctors say she's responding well to treatment. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by suspicion. You've spoken to her doctors? I own the hospital now. More specifically, I own the wing where she's being treated. Amazing what you can accomplish with the right financial incentives. The message was clear. Her mother's life depended on Vanessa's cooperation. One wrong move, one moment of rebellion, and the treatment would stop. Her mother would die, and it would be Vanessa's fault for not playing along. I want to see the treatment records. Why? Don't you trust me? Should I? His laugh had no warmth in it. Trust is earned, Vanessa. You haven't earned mine yet, but you will. The way he said, you will make her skin crawl. It wasn't a prediction, it was a threat. Have you ever felt like someone was watching your every move? When does protection become control? Share your thoughts below. That afternoon, while Ethan attended another meeting with people whose names she wasn't allowed to know, Vanessa found something that changed everything. Hidden in his home office, behind books that were clearly for decoration, she discovered a small device no bigger than a hearing aid. The kind used for recording conversations. But this one wasn't just recording, it was transmitting. The tiny screen showed an active connection to an unknown receiver. Someone else was listening to their private conversations. Someone outside the penthouse, outside Ethan's control, was gathering intelligence on them both. Her hands trembled as she realized the truth. Ethan wasn't just watching her. Someone was watching him. And if they were smart enough to plant surveillance devices in his private office, they knew about his illegal activities, his business dealings, his secrets, maybe even his mistress in Miami. As she carefully replaced the device exactly where she'd found it, one question burned in her mind. Who else was playing this game? And how could she find them? The red light in the corner blinked steadily, recording her every move. But now she knew she wasn't the only one being watched. And that knowledge felt like the first weapon she'd found in a war she was finally ready to fight. She knew about the Mistress before he did. Knowledge that would become her most dangerous weapon. The private investigator's business card had been burning a hole in Vanessa's jewelry box for 2 weeks. Margaret Chen's contact, a woman named Sarah Kim who specialized in delicate situations involving powerful men. Vanessa made the call from a burner phone purchase during one of her supervised shopping trips. Security guards thought she was buying makeup. Instead, she bought freedom. "I need to know everything about my husband," she told Sarah during their meeting at a crowded coffee shop in Chinatown where surveillance would be impossible. His business, his friends, his secrets, everything. Sarah Kim looked like a librarian, but had the eyes of a hunter. She slid a tablet across the table, showing photographs that made Vanessa's stomach drop. Ethan with a woman who looked like a supermodel crossed with a weapons designer. Dark hair, perfect body, dangerous smile. Isabella Cruz, originally from Miami, currently living in a penthouse that Ethan paid for 3 blocks from his office. "How long?" Vanessa asked, studying photos of them together on yachts, in restaurants, in hotel rooms that should have been private. 2 years. She started as his assistant, moved up to consultant. Now she's his companion. He buys her jewelry, pays her rent, takes her on business trips disguised as work meetings. 2 years. Their entire fake relationship had been a lie on top of a lie. What else? Sarah swiped to financial records that made Vanessa's head spin. He's been transferring money to offshore accounts. Large amounts. The kind that trigger federal investigations if anyone notices. Money laundering? Worse, industrial espionage. Isabella has connections to foreign tech companies. She's been feeding them information about his competitors, government contracts, classified projects. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Vanessa realized she wasn't just married to an arrogant billionaire. She was married to a traitor. "There's more," Sarah continued. "The FBI has been watching him for 6 months. They know about Isabella, the money transfers, the stolen technology. They're building a case. Then why hasn't he been arrested? They want the whole network. Isabella's not working alone. There's senators, judges, other CEOs involved. Ethan's just one piece of a bigger puzzle." Vanessa stared at the photos spread across the table like evidence in a murder trial. Her fake husband was a criminal. His mistress was a spy, and she was trapped in the middle of a federal investigation that could destroy everyone involved. "What happens to me when they arrest him?" "Depends. Are you involved in his crimes?" "No." "Can you prove that?" The question hit like ice water. She was his wife on paper, living in his house, benefiting from his money. In the eyes of the law, she might be considered an accomplice whether she knew about his crimes or not. "I can help you," Sarah said quietly, "but it requires proof, evidence, documentation. And most importantly, it requires you to get close enough to gather information the FBI can use. You want me to spy on him? I want you to save yourself. Because when this house of cards falls, everyone inside gets crushed unless they have something to trade." That night, Vanessa lay in bed thinking about Isabella Cruz. The woman was beautiful, dangerous, and apparently smart enough to manipulate a billionaire into committing treason. But she'd made one mistake. She'd underestimated the wife. The next morning brought an opportunity disguised as an insult. "I'll be traveling to Miami this weekend," Ethan announced over breakfast neither of them touched. "Business meetings with potential investors. You'll stay here, of course." "Of course," Vanessa agreed, buttering toast she didn't want. "Wouldn't want to bore me with business." "Exactly. You understand your place perfectly." Her place. As if she were furniture to be arranged according to his convenience. But as his private jet taxied down the runway Friday afternoon, Vanessa was already putting her own plan into motion. She had 48 hours to search his office, copy his files, and gather evidence that would either save her life or destroy it. The penthouse felt different without Ethan's presence, smaller somehow, like his ego had been taking up physical space. Vanessa moved through rooms she'd only seen while being watched, finally free to touch things, open drawers, discover secrets. His home office was a shrine to himself. Awards, photos with politicians, newspaper clippings about his genius and vision. But behind the ego wall, she found the real treasure: financial records, encrypted hard drives, and a safe hidden behind a painting of himself. The safe required a combination. Vanessa tried his birthday, his company's founding date, his mother's maiden name. Nothing worked. Then she remembered something Sarah had mentioned about Isabella. She tried Isabella's birthday. The safe opened like it had been waiting for her. Inside were documents that made her hand shake. Government contracts worth billions. Technology blueprints marked classified. Bank statements showing transfers to accounts in countries that didn't ask questions about where money came from. And photographs. Not the romantic kind Sarah had shown her, but surveillance photos of Isabella meeting with men in expensive suits who had the look of people who solved problems with violence instead of lawyers. How would you handle discovering your partner's affair? Would you confront immediately or gather evidence first? Tell me your strategy in the comments. Vanessa photographed everything with a camera Sarah had given her, each click feeling like ammunition being loaded for a war she was finally ready to fight. But as she worked, one thought kept returning. Isabella wasn't just Ethan's mistress. She was his handler. And if Isabella was working for people who used violence to solve problems, Vanessa needed to be very careful about how she used this information. Because knowledge was power, but power made you a target. The sound of car doors slamming in the street below made her freeze. Through the window, she could see Ethan stepping out of a black sedan, his Miami trip apparently cut short. She had 30 seconds to close the safe, replace the painting, and pretend she'd been innocently reading in her room all evening. As footsteps echoed in the elevator shaft, heading toward the penthouse, Vanessa realized her life had just become infinitely more dangerous. And infinitely more interesting. The most powerful weapon against a billionaire isn't money. It's the people he's forgotten along the way. The abandoned warehouse in Oakland felt like stepping into Ethan's past, before the marble and gold, before the empire, when he was just another hungry entrepreneur willing to destroy friendships for profit. Rust stained the walls where rain had leaked through broken windows, and pigeons nested in rafters that once supported dreams. Marcus Rodriguez waited in the shadows like a ghost of Ethan's former conscience. Vanessa had found his name buried in old business documents, co-founder of the company that became Ethan's empire, erased from official histories, but not from legal papers that careful eyes could discover. "You're prettier than I expected," Marcus said, stepping into the dim light filtering through broken skylights. Ethan always did prefer his possessions beautiful. He was taller than Ethan, broader in the shoulders, with hands that looked like they'd built things instead of just buying them. His jeans were worn but clean, his t-shirt simple but fitted. Where Ethan screamed wealth, Marcus whispered strength. "I'm nobody's possession. Then why are you married to him?" The question cut deeper than intended. Vanessa pulled the envelope of photographs from her bag, spreading them across a paint-stained workbench like cards in a deadly poker game. "Because I didn't know what he was. Now I do." Marcus studied the images, Ethan with Isabella, the financial records, the classified documents. His jaw tightened with each photograph, old anger surfacing like oil on water. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "He's selling military secrets. You're not surprised about Isabella. Nothing Ethan does surprises me anymore. He destroyed our company, stole my designs, ruined my reputation. Sleeping with foreign agents is just the next logical step. Tell me what happened." Marcus leaned against the workbench, his eyes distant with memories that still had power to wound. "We started Called Tech together 10 years ago. I designed the software. He handled business. We were going to change the world, make technology that helped people instead of exploiting them. What went wrong? I fell in love." Her name was Rebecca. She was a journalist investigating defense contractors who were overcharging the government for substandard equipment. Smart, beautiful, determined to expose corruption wherever she found it. The past tense made Vanessa's stomach clench. What happened to her? Car accident. Brake failure on a mountain road. Very convenient timing, considering she was about to publish an article that would have cost several companies billions in contracts. "You think Ethan was involved?" "I know he was." Rebecca had been investigating Called Tech as part of her story. She discovered that Ethan was using my designs to create backdoors in military software, selling access to foreign governments. When she confronted him, he told her it was just business. "Did you go to the police?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what evidence?" "The brake lines were corroded. The investigation concluded it was mechanical failure." Rebecca's research disappeared from her apartment, and Ethan had already filed patents on my designs, claiming he'd created them alone. So you lost everything. Everything that mattered. My company, my work, the woman I loved. Ethan kept the empire we built together and erased me from its history. Vanessa studied Marcus's face, seeing pain that money couldn't heal and anger that time hadn't diminished. But beneath the hurt, she recognized something familiar, the determination of someone who refused to stay broken. Why are you helping me? Because Ethan thinks he's untouchable. Because he's gotten away with murder, literally, and he needs to face consequences. And because Marcus moved closer, his presence warm in the cold warehouse. You remind me of Rebecca, smart enough to see through his lies, brave enough to fight back. The comparison should have felt like pressure. Instead, it felt like recognition. What do you need from me? Access. Ethan trusts you enough to leave you alone in his house. I need you to install software on his computers, copy his files, document his meetings with Isabella. That's espionage. That's justice. Marcus pulled a flash drive from his pocket, no bigger than a thumb, but containing enough digital firepower to bring down a government. This program will copy everything: emails, files, video calls, financial records. He'll never know it's there. And if he catches me, then you disappear like Rebecca did. The warehouse fell silent, except for pigeons cooing in the rafters and distant traffic humming on the freeway. Vanessa stared at the flash drive, understanding that taking it meant crossing a line she could never uncross. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. Something you should know before you decide. What? Your marriage contract wasn't random. Ethan specifically requested someone from Detroit, someone with no family except a sick mother, someone desperate enough to agree to anything. He's done this before. The words hit like physical blows. What do you mean? Other women, other contracts, other wives who serve their purpose and then disappeared. Ethan collects broken women, uses them, and discards them when they become inconvenient. How many? 3 that I can prove. Probably more. Vanessa's hands shook as she reached for the flash drive. What happened to them? Accidents. Suicides. One just vanished completely, but they all had one thing in common. They discovered Ethan's secrets and tried to use them. Have you ever found attraction in the most unexpected place? When someone fights alongside you, does that change everything? Share your thoughts below. Marcus's fingers brushed hers as she took the device, the contact sending electricity up her arm. In the abandoned warehouse where Ethan's first betrayal had taken place, she was forming an alliance that could destroy him or get them both killed. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only person who hates him as much as you're starting to. As they prepared to leave separately, Marcus disappearing into Oakland's industrial maze, while Vanessa returned to her golden cage, she realized the game had changed completely. She wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. She was building an army of the wounded, the betrayed, the forgotten. And when they struck, Ethan Caldwell would discover that the most dangerous enemies were the ones he taught to fight by destroying everything they loved. The flash drive felt warm in her palm as she drove back toward the city, like it was alive with possibility and threat. In her purse, her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Dinner at 8. Wear the red dress. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? She wondered, and she realized. He probably thought his Miami trip had been successful, that Isabella had delivered more secrets, completed more transactions, moved them closer to whatever endgame they were planning. He had no idea that his wife had just armed herself with weapons that could turn his celebration into his funeral. The real war was about to begin. She learned to play chess from a master who never realized he was teaching his opponent how to destroy him. The flash drive felt like carrying dynamite as Vanessa moved through the penthouse at 3 in the morning. Ethan slept soundly in his master bedroom, exhausted from his business dinner that had lasted until midnight and smelled like Isabella's perfume when he finally came home. His home office, after midnight, felt like a tomb of secrets. Leather-bound books lined walls like silent witnesses, hiding flash drives behind fake spines. Oil paintings of dead businessmen watched from gold frames while she worked, their painted eyes following her movements like security cameras that couldn't record. The computer hummed to life with barely a whisper. Vanessa's hands trembled as she inserted Marcus's flash drive, watching lines of code flood the screen like digital blood flowing through electronic veins. The program worked silently, copying files, emails, video calls, financial records, everything that could bury Ethan 6 feet under federal prison. A soft chime indicated the download was complete. 30 seconds to remove the drive, close the computer, and pretend she'd been sleeping peacefully all night. But as she reached for the flash drive, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Ethan was awake. Vanessa's heart hammered against her ribs as she yanked the drive free and slammed the laptop shut. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the sound of water running in the kitchen. He was getting a drink, probably whiskey, to wash away whatever Isabella had demanded of him tonight. She slipped through the office door and down the hallway, her bare feet silent on marble floors that reflected moonlight like frozen water. Her bedroom door closed with barely a whisper just as Ethan's footsteps approached the office. Through her bedroom wall, she heard him enter the office, heard the chair creak as he sat down, heard the computer humming back to life. If he discovered the intrusion, if he found traces of the program, if he suspected anything, minutes passed like hours. Finally, the office went quiet. Footsteps retreated toward his bedroom. A door closed. Silence returned like a held breath finally released. Vanessa lay in her bed, clutching the flash drive that contained enough evidence to destroy a billionaire. But as she stared at the ceiling, she realized she'd crossed more than just a legal line tonight. She declared war on a man who'd already killed to protect his secrets. The next morning brought breakfast and revelations that changed everything. "We need to discuss the wedding," Ethan announced over coffee that neither of them drank. "The ceremony is in 2 weeks. 300 guests, full media coverage, the works. I thought we were already married. Legally, yes, but appearances matter. Investors want to see commitment, stability, traditional values. A big wedding shows them I'm a family man they can trust with their money. Traditional values. From a man who'd murdered his business partner's girlfriend and sold military secrets to foreign enemies. What do you need from me? Smile. Look radiant. Play the perfect bride who's madly in love with her successful husband." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Think you can handle that level of performance?" "I've been handling it for months." "Good, because there will be cameras everywhere. News crews, social media, security footage. Every moment will be recorded and analyzed. One wrong look, one false note, and people will start asking questions we don't want answered." The threat was clear. Perform perfectly or face consequences that would make surveillance cameras seem like gentle reminders. "Will Isabella be attending?" The question slipped out before Vanessa could stop it. Ethan's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips, his pale eyes turning arctic cold. "What did you say?" "I asked if your assistant would be attending. Isabella Cruz. I've seen her name on your calendar frequently. My business associates don't concern you. Your wife should know who works closely with her husband. My wife should know her place." The words hit like ice water, but Vanessa forced herself to smile sweetly. "Of course. I just want to be prepared for introductions at the reception." Ethan studied her face like a scientist examining a potentially dangerous specimen. "Isabella en l'international client. She travels frequently. She won't be attending." Liar. Vanessa had seen the hotel receipts in his office files. Isabella would be staying at the Ritz-Carlton during the wedding weekend, 3 floors below the bridal suite, close enough to celebrate Ethan's public commitment to one woman while privately belonging to another. "Understand completely," Vanessa said, buttering toast she didn't want. "Business always comes first." "Exactly. I'm glad you're finally learning. What's the difference between justice and revenge? When someone has all the power, how do you take it back? Tell me in the comments." That afternoon, while Ethan attended board meetings where he probably discussed which government secrets to sell next, Vanessa met Marcus at a different location. A small cafe in Berkeley where college students studied over expensive coffee and no one paid attention to quiet conversations in corner booths. The program worked perfectly, Marcus said, scrolling through files on an encrypted laptop. Financial records, email exchanges, video calls with foreign contacts. Everything we need to prove he's been selling classified technology. Including evidence about Rebecca. Marcus's jaw tightened, including communications between Ethan and the man who sabotaged her car. Payments made through offshore accounts. Confirmation that she was killed to protect his espionage operation. Can we take this to the FBI? We could, but there's a problem. Marcus turned the laptop so she could see email exchanges between Ethan and someone with a government email address. He has connections inside federal law enforcement. Judges, prosecutors, FBI agents, people who would warn him if an investigation was coming. Then we're on our own. No, we have something better than law enforcement. What? Public humiliation. These files don't just prove he's a traitor. They show him to be weak, controlled by a foreign agent, betrayed by his own arrogance. Billionaires can survive criminal charges with good lawyers. They can't survive being exposed as pathetic. Marcus pulled out a tablet showing wedding venue layouts, security positions, media schedules. The wedding is perfect. Maximum exposure, live streaming, social media coverage. If we release this information during the ceremony, the whole world will watch him fall. That's assuming I survive long enough to get to the altar. You will, because you're stronger than he thinks, smarter than he realizes, and you have something he's never had. What's that? People who fight for you instead of against you. Marcus reached across the table, his fingers covering hers. The contact sent electricity through her nerves, but this time it wasn't just attraction. It was recognition, partnership, two damaged people choosing to heal each other instead of hurting the world. There's something else, he said quietly. Something you should know before we go any further. Tell me, I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything she thought she knew about herself. She'd entered this mess to save her mother's life. She'd found evidence to save her own. But somewhere between survival and revenge, she discovered something she'd never expected. Hope. Marcus, I know the timing is terrible. I know we're in the middle of something dangerous. But after Rebecca died, I thought I'd never feel this way about anyone again. Then I met you. And you reminded me what it feels like to want to protect something beautiful instead of just destroying something ugly. We can't think about this now. Not until we finish what we started. I know, but I wanted you to know in case something happens. In case we don't both make it through this. Vanessa stared at their joined hands, understanding that the game had changed again. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even just about justice. It was about choosing between the life she'd accepted and the life she could create. Nothing's going to happen to us, she said firmly. We're going to destroy him, and then we're going to build something real. Promise? I promise. As they left the cafe separately, Marcus disappearing into Berkeley's academic maze, while Vanessa returned to her golden prison, she realized that love wasn't weakness. Love was fuel for the fire that would burn Ethan's empire to ash. The wedding was in 12 days. In 12 days, she would stand at an altar in front of 300 guests and deliver justice disguised as a gift. She could hardly wait. The wedding dress felt like armor as she prepared for the battle that would decide who would be destroyed. Vanessa stood in the bridal suite at the Ritz-Carlton, surrounded by assistants who treated her upcoming wedding like a military operation. Seamstresses pinned silk while florists arranged orchids. Photographers tested lighting angles, while caterers discussed menu modifications. Everyone buzzed with purpose, creating perfection for a ceremony that would end in devastation. The dress itself was a masterpiece of deception. White silk that suggested innocence, hand-sewn pearls that whispered purity, a cathedral train that promised happily ever after. But hidden in the bodice, sewn into seams where security screenings would never find them, were micro SD cards containing enough evidence to topple governments. "You look radiant," gushed the wedding planner, a woman whose smile seemed surgically attached to her face, absolutely glowing with happiness. Happiness. If only she knew that the glow came from anticipation of revenge, not romance. "Have you heard from Mr. Caldwell this morning?" Vanessa asked, allowing a manicurist to paint her nails the color of fresh blood. I know he had early meetings. He's handling last-minute details with the security team. So many important people attending. Senators, judges, business leaders. We want everything perfect. Perfect. The word everyone kept using, like perfection was possible when the foundation was built on murder and treason. Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Package delivered. Opening night guaranteed to be memorable. The package was a program that would broadcast the evidence files on every screen in the ballroom the moment she gave the signal. Wedding guests expecting to watch romantic videos would instead see financial records, classified documents, and recorded conversations proving that the groom was a traitor who'd killed for profit. Mom. The seamstress interrupted her thoughts. Could you lift your arms? The bodice needs final adjustments. As fabric was pinned and tucked around her ribs, Vanessa thought about the other women who'd worn white dresses for Ethan's purposes. How many had stood where she was standing, believing they were beginning new lives instead of walking toward their own destruction? A knock at the suite door interrupted the preparations. One of Ethan's security guards entered, a man who looked like he solved problems with violence instead of conversation. Mrs. Caldwell? Mr. Caldwell requests a private word before the ceremony. The seamstresses and assistants scattered like birds, leaving Vanessa alone with a man whose job was ensuring she didn't escape before fulfilling her contractual obligations. They walked through hotel corridors lined with wedding flowers that smelled like funeral arrangements, past guests arriving in expensive cars with drivers who probably doubled as bodyguards. Ethan waited in a private conference room, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than most people's monthly salary. He looked perfect, as always, perfectly groomed, perfectly dressed, perfectly hollow inside. You look beautiful, he said, circling her like a predator admiring prey. Exactly what I pictured when I ordered you. Ordered. Not married. Not chose. Ordered. Thank you. In 1 hour, we'll be married in front of everyone who matters in the city. Cameras will record every moment. Social media will spread our images across the world. And you will smile like the happiest woman alive. Of course. Because if you don't, if you embarrass me in any way, if you give even one person reason to question this marriage. His voice dropped to a whisper that felt like ice against her skin. Your mother's treatment stops immediately. The hospital will claim her insurance was canceled due to clerical errors. She'll die slowly, painfully, while you watch. The threat hit like it always did, cold, precise, designed to remind her exactly how much power he held over everything she loved. I understand. Good. Because after today, there will be no more games. No more testing boundaries. You'll be my wife publicly and privately. And you'll remember that wives who disappoint their husbands have a habit of having accidents. Accidents. Like Rebecca. Like the other women who'd signed contracts and learned too much. Is there anything else? Yes. Ethan moved closer, his presence suffocating in the small room. Isabella sends her congratulations. She's disappointed she can't attend, but business calls. She'll be thinking of us during the ceremony. The lie came so easily like breathing. Isabella was 3 floors below them, probably watching on hotel security cameras, waiting for her signal to either celebrate Ethan's continued success or eliminate a problem named Vanessa Martinez. How thoughtful of her. She really is remarkable. Intelligent, loyal, beautiful. Everything a man could want in a woman. Have you ever had a smile through something that was killing you inside? How do you find strength when everything depends on your performance? Share below. I'm sure she is. After our honeymoon, you'll meet her properly. I think you two will get along wonderfully. You have so much in common. What they had in common was being used by the same man for different purposes. But while Isabella had chosen her role willingly, Vanessa had been bought and sold like property. That was about to change. I should return to preparations, Vanessa said, smoothing silk that would soon be stained with the blood of Ethan's reputation. Of course. I'll see you at the altar, my beautiful bride. As security escorted her back to the bridal suite, Vanessa's phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Everything in position. Give them hell. Hell was exactly what she planned to deliver. In 45 minutes, Ethan Caldwell would discover that the woman he'd bought and controlled and threatened was about to give him the wedding gift of his lifetime. His complete and total destruction. The most expensive wedding in Atlanta history was about to become the most explosive scandal in American business. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom gleamed like a cathedral of wealth, crystal chandeliers casting rainbows across walls lined with 300 guests who represented billions in combined net worth. Politicians in $1,000 suits mingled with tech moguls wearing watches that cost more than houses. Federal judges shared champagne with defense contractors while senators laughed at jokes that weren't funny but were politically necessary. Vanessa stood at the back of the ballroom, her hand resting on her father's arm. A family friend from Detroit who'd flown in to walk her down the aisle because her real father had died years ago in a factory accident that wealthy men like Ethan would have called cost of doing business. The wedding march began, played by a string quartet that charged more per song than most people earned in a month. Cameras flashed like lightning while phones recorded every step, every smile, every moment of what the media was already calling the wedding of the year. Ethan waited at the altar in a tuxedo that made him look like a magazine cover, his smile perfect for the cameras recording everything for live broadcast. Behind him stood his best man, Harrison Webb, the venture capitalist who'd called women investments that appreciate over time. The wedding party consisted entirely of men who'd made fortunes by treating human beings like commodities. As Vanessa walked down the aisle, she caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd. Margaret Chin sat in the third row, wearing diamonds and a knowing smile. Sarah Kim, the private investigator, had somehow gotten credentials as a society photographer. And in the very back, partially hidden behind a pillar, Marcus Rodriguez watched with eyes that promised justice was coming. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice echoing through speakers that would soon broadcast very different words. "We're gathered here today to witness the union of Ethan Michael Caldwell and Vanessa Maria Martinez in holy matrimony." Holy matrimony. Nothing about this ceremony was holy except the justice about to be served. The minister droned through traditional vows while Vanessa studied the faces in the crowd. These people represented everything wrong with a system that allowed wealth to buy immunity from consequences. Senators who'd taken bribes, judges who'd sold verdicts, businessmen who'd profited from other people's suffering. In 10 minutes, they would all witness the destruction of the man they'd come to celebrate. Do you, Ethan Michael Caldwell, take Vanessa Maria Martinez to be your lawfully wedded wife? "I do," Ethan said, his voice carrying the same tone he used when closing business deals. Acquisition complete. Contract finalized. Do you, Vanessa Maria Martinez, take Ethan Michael Caldwell to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was the moment, the point of no return, the instant where she could still choose safety over justice, survival over truth. "I do," she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "The bride and groom have prepared personal vows," the minister announced. Ethan turned to face the crowd, his smile radiating confidence and victory. "Vanessa represents everything I've ever wanted in a partner. Beauty, grace, and most importantly, the wisdom to understand her place in my life. She completes me in ways I never thought possible." Completes him. Like she was a missing piece of furniture he'd finally found to match his decor. "She's taught me that love isn't about what you can take from someone," he continued, lies flowing like expensive wine. "It's about what you can build together. Today, I'm not just gaining a wife. I'm gaining a partner who will help me reach heights I never imagined possible." The crowd applauded politely while Vanessa died inside. Everything he said was the opposite of truth, designed to make their relationship sound romantic instead of transactional. "Vanessa," the minister prompted. This was it, the moment she'd been planning for months. The instant where she would deliver justice disguised as love. But as she opened her mouth to speak, Ethan stepped closer to the microphone. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom with devastating clarity, "there's something I need to say first. Something about honesty and truth in marriage." The crowd stirred, sensing drama about to unfold. Cameras zoomed closer, while phones recorded every word. "Vanessa," Ethan said, turning to face her with eyes that had gone completely cold, "has been a wonderful companion these past months. But companionship isn't love, and I've discovered that I can't marry someone I don't truly love." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Guests leaned forward in their seats, while cameras captured every expression of shock and confusion. "The truth is," Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I'm in love with someone else. Someone who understands my needs, my ambitions, my vision for the future. Someone who deserves to stand beside me as my true partner." Vanessa's blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. This wasn't part of his plan. This was improvisation. This was him destroying her in front of the entire world. "Isabella Cruz," Ethan called toward the back of the ballroom. "Would you join me?" A woman in red silk emerged from behind the cameras, moving down the aisle like she owned every inch of space she occupied. Isabella was everything Vanessa wasn't. Confident where Vanessa was careful, aggressive where Vanessa was strategic, beautiful in a way that demanded attention instead of inspiring protection. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan announced as Isabella reached the altar, "I'd like you to meet my true bride, the woman I should have married from the beginning." What would you do if you had the power to destroy someone who destroyed you? Is public humiliation justified? Tell me in the comments. But as the crowd erupted in confused whispers and camera flashes exploded like fireworks, Vanessa felt something unexpected: relief. Because Ethan had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd given her the perfect opening for revenge. "How romantic," Vanessa said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. "A public betrayal at our own wedding. But before you continue this touching love story, I have a wedding gift for you." She reached into her bouquet, pulling out a small device that looked innocent enough to pass security, but powerful enough to change history. "You said this marriage was about truth and honesty," she continued, walking toward the massive video screens that lined the ballroom walls. "So let's be completely honest." The device connected to the ballroom's audio-visual system with a soft click that seemed to echo like thunder. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vanessa announced, "allow me to present the real Ethan Caldwell." The screens flickered to life, displaying financial records, classified documents, recorded conversations, and surveillance footage that made the crowd's gasps turn to screams of shock. "Meet the man who sells military secrets to foreign governments," Vanessa said as evidence flashed across every screen. "Who murders journalists who investigate his crimes. Who marries women and disposes of them when they become inconvenient." Isabella's face went white as her own conversations with foreign agents filled the ballroom with the sound of treason. Ethan lunged toward the screens, but it was too late. The evidence was broadcasting live to millions of viewers around the world. "You chose her over me, Ethan," Vanessa said, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "I choose justice over both of you." As federal agents burst through the ballroom doors, badges flashing and handcuffs ready, Vanessa realized her revenge was complete. But Ethan's final words as they dragged him away made her blood run cold. "You have no idea what you've just started. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Victory tastes like champagne and danger." She had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom looked like a crime scene after an explosion. Overturned chairs scattered across marble floors while abandoned champagne glasses reflected flashing police lights through floor-to-ceiling windows. Wedding flowers wilted under harsh camera lights as news crews documented the aftermath of what reporters were already calling the scandal that brought down Silicon Valley. Vanessa sat in a conference room 3 floors above the chaos, still wearing her wedding dress, but with handcuffs replaced by a federal agent's business card. Special Agent Diana Torres had kind eyes and careful questions, treating Vanessa like a witness instead of a criminal despite her role in orchestrating the evening's destruction. "You understand you're in protective custody," Agent Torres explained, reviewing files that contained more evidence than most federal cases saw in years. "Ethan Caldwell's organization has connections to some very dangerous people. People who don't appreciate public exposure." "How dangerous?" The kind who solve problems with car accidents and heart attacks. The kind who make people disappear so completely that even missing person reports get lost in bureaucratic shuffles. Through the conference room windows, Vanessa could see news vans lined up like tanks preparing for siege. Reporters shouted questions at anyone wearing expensive clothes, while photographers captured images that would be on magazine covers before morning. Where's Isabella? In federal custody. Turns out she's been feeding information to 3 different foreign governments while running a human trafficking operation disguised as an international modeling agency. Your evidence gave us everything we needed to shut down networks that have been operating for decades. The word should have felt like victory, but all Vanessa could think about was Ethan's final threat. You have no idea what you've just started. What happens now? We process the evidence, build cases, arrest everyone involved. Your testimony will be crucial for prosecuting senators, judges, business leaders who participated in the corruption. You've exposed a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. And Ethan, Agent Torres smiled for the first time since entering the room. Ethan Caldwell will never see freedom again. Treason, murder, conspiracy, human trafficking. He's facing charges that carry the death penalty. His empire is being seized, his assets frozen, his life as he knew it completely destroyed. The words should have felt satisfying. Instead, they felt incomplete. Destroying Ethan was justice, but it didn't bring back Rebecca or the other women he'd killed. It didn't erase months of feeling like property instead of a person. There's someone here to see you, Agent Torres said, checking her phone. Marcus Rodriguez. He's been cleared by security. Marcus entered the conference room like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. His embrace felt like coming home after years of being lost, warm and solid and real in ways that wealth could never buy. Are you okay? He whispered against her hair, his voice rough with emotion she'd never heard before. I'm free, she said, surprising herself with how true it felt. For the first time in my life, I'm completely free. Your mother is safe, he said, pulling back to meet her eyes. I've moved her to a private facility where Ethan's people can't reach her. Full security, best doctors money can buy. She's going to be fine. Relief flooded through her like warm water, washing away months of fear and desperation. Her mother was safe. Ethan was destroyed. The evidence had been delivered. Everything she'd fought for had been achieved. What about us? She asked quietly. What happens to us now? Marcus cupped her face in hands that had built things instead of just buying them, callous from honest work instead of soft from inherited wealth. Now we build something real, he said, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize were falling. Something that belongs to us instead of something we had to steal or survive. But before they could discuss their future, Agent Torres's phone buzzed with an urgency that made her face go pale. We have a problem, she said, ending the call with hands that trembled slightly. Someone just tried to break into your mother's hospital room. Armed men with foreign accents who claimed to be insurance investigators. The conference room felt smaller suddenly, air thicker with threat instead of triumph. Are they? Your mother is safe. Security stopped them before they reached her floor. But this confirms our worst fears. Which are? Ethan's arrest was just the beginning. The people he worked for, the networks he exposed, the governments whose secrets he sold. They're not going to let this end with his imprisonment. Marcus pulled Vanessa closer, his body instinctively shielding her from threats that couldn't be stopped with physical protection. What does that mean for us? It means you're both high-value targets now. It means going into witness protection until we can eliminate the threats against you. It means disappearing completely until this is over. Disappearing, after fighting so hard to become visible, to matter, to have her voice heard. The price of victory was invisibility. Have you ever won something that cost more than you expected? When justice comes with a price, is it still worth it? Share your thoughts. For how long? Months? Maybe years? These organizations move slowly, but they move thoroughly. Everyone who helped expose them will be marked for elimination. Vanessa stared out the window at reporters who were turning her story into entertainment, guests who were turning her wedding into gossip, a world that would consume her tragedy and move on to the next scandal within days. There's another option, Agent Torres said carefully. Something off the books. Something that would let you disappear but still live your lives. What kind of option? Fake deaths, new identities, complete erasure of Vanessa Martinez and Marcus Rodriguez. You'd be free to start over anywhere in the world, but you could never contact your old lives again. The choice hung in the air like smoke from a fire that could either warm them or burn everything down. Freedom or safety, new life or witness protection, love or survival. What do you think? Vanessa asked Marcus, though she already knew her answer. I think, he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the decision, that we've already died to our old lives. Might as well make it official and be reborn as people who choose their own fate. Agent Torres nodded like she'd expected this answer. I'll make the arrangements. Within 48 hours, Vanessa Martinez and Marcus Rodriguez will be officially dead in a car accident outside the city. 2 days after that, two people with new names and new histories will board separate flights to a location where they can start building the life they deserve. As they walked out of the conference room toward a future that belonged entirely to them, Vanessa felt lighter than she had since signing the contract that brought her to San Francisco. Behind them lay the wreckage of Ethan's empire and the graves of his victims. Ahead lay possibility, but in her purse, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. We know who you are. We know where you're going. And we never forget. Freedom, it seemed, would cost more than she'd imagined. But for the first time in her life, Vanessa knew exactly what she was buying with that price. A chance to love and be loved in return. A chance to build instead of just survive. A chance to choose her own ending. It was worth any price they could demand. Taking down a billionaire is easy. Surviving his criminal network is where the real game begins. The safe house in rural Montana felt like stepping into a different world. Log walls instead of marble floors. Mountain views instead of city skylines. Silence broken only by wind through pine trees instead of traffic and sirens. Vanessa sat by a wood-burning fireplace, watching flames dance while federal agents secured the perimeter with equipment that could detect threats from miles away. Marcus worked at a kitchen table covered with laptops and encrypted phones, coordinating with Agent Torres and a network of allies who were helping other victims of Ethan's organization disappear before his associates could silence them permanently. How many others were there? Vanessa asked. Joining him at the table were photographs of women spread like evidence in a murder trial. 17 that we can prove. Probably more. Marcus's jaw tightened as he studied faces of women who trusted the wrong man and paid with their lives. All young, all desperate, all targeted specifically because they had no one to protect them. What happened to them? Accidents, suicides, disappearances, always after they discovered something they shouldn't have known, always when they became inconvenient. He pulled up police reports that read like fiction except for the verified death certificates. Car crashes on mountain roads, drug overdoses despite no history of substance abuse, hiking accidents in areas they'd never visited. Each file was a life cut short. A story ended before it could reach its true conclusion. Women who'd signed contracts thinking they were saving themselves, only to discover they'd signed their own death warrants. There's something else, Marcus said, opening a file that made Vanessa's blood run cold. A pattern in the timing. Every woman who died was killed exactly 1 month before her contract would have expired. He didn't want to pay what he owed them. Worse than that, look at this. Marcus showed her financial records that revealed the true scope of Ethan's evil. Each woman's death triggered life insurance policies that paid out to shell companies he controlled. He wasn't just avoiding payment. He was profiting from their murders. The fireplace suddenly felt too warm, the safe house too small, the mountain air too thin. Vanessa realized she'd married a man who collected women like investments, using them until they became profitable in death. The FBI knows about this. They're building cases, but evidence takes time to process through official channels. Meanwhile, the people who worked with Ethan are eliminating anyone who could testify against them. Marcus's phone buzzed with an encrypted message that made his face go pale. "We have a problem." "What now?" "3 more safe houses have been compromised. Federal witnesses murdered in their sleep. Agents found dead at their posts. Someone inside law enforcement is feeding information to Ethan's network." The walls felt closer suddenly, the windows more vulnerable, the silence outside more threatening than comforting. They weren't safe anywhere if their own protectors couldn't be trusted. "We need to run." "Run where?" "If they have sources inside the FBI, they could track us anywhere in the country. Then we don't stay in the country." Marcus stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "Vanessa, these aren't just criminals. They're international organizations with resources that make government agencies look poor. Running abroad means becoming targets for everyone they work with." "Then we don't run. We fight." "Fight how?" "We're 2 people against networks that span continents." Vanessa stood and moved to the window, studying the mountain landscape that stretched toward horizons she'd never imagined reaching. In Detroit, horizons have been defined by city limits and economic circumstances. In San Francisco, they've been controlled by contract terms and legal obligations. Here, for the first time, she could see possibilities that had no boundaries except the one she chose to accept. "We fight with what we have: knowledge, evidence, and allies who've been hurt the same way we have." What allies? The families of the women he killed, the people whose lives he destroyed, the victims who survived. Vanessa turned back to Marcus, her mind racing with possibilities that felt dangerous and necessary at the same time. Ethan's power came from isolation, keeping his victims separate, making them feel alone. What if we brought them together? Marcus studied her face like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "You want to build a coalition. I want to build an army." That's exactly what they're afraid of. Why do you think they're working so hard to silence everyone? They know that victims who unite become unstoppable. When you stand up to a bully, do others find courage to join you? Have you ever been part of something bigger than yourself? Tell me below. Over the next hours, as mountain darkness settled around the safe house like protective camouflage, Vanessa and Marcus reached out to survivors across the country. Rebecca's sister, who'd never believed the official story about her death. Former employees of Called Tech, who'd been blacklisted for asking uncomfortable questions. Journalists who'd investigated Ethan's business practices and faced mysterious threats that ended their careers. One by one, they answered the call. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not for money, but for the chance to ensure that other women wouldn't face the same fate. Margaret Chin was the first to offer concrete help. "My husband's restaurants employ half the city's service workers," she said during an encrypted video call. "They see everything, hear everything, know everyone. If you need information moved quietly, I have networks that span the entire West Coast." Sarah Kim, the private investigator, provided something even more valuable. A list of other women who'd signed contracts with wealthy men and disappeared under suspicious circumstances. "This pattern goes beyond Ethan," she explained. "There's a whole system designed to exploit vulnerable women. What you've exposed is just the beginning." By dawn, they had commitments from 47 people across 12 states. Survivors, family members, investigators, journalists, lawyers who specialized in cases the system preferred to ignore. Not an organization with official structure, but a network of people who refuse to let evil operate in darkness. "They're coming for us," Marcus said, checking security feeds that showed unmarked vehicles moving through the valley below. Multiple approaches, professional coordination. "We have maybe 20 minutes before they reach the house." Vanessa felt strangely calm as she gathered their evidence files and encrypted communications. The network they'd built would survive even if they didn't. Truth had a way of spreading once enough people decided to tell it. "Where do we go?" "Somewhere they won't expect." Marcus pulled out a map of routes through the mountain wilderness. "There's an old mining camp about 50 miles north. Abandoned for decades. No roads, no cell towers. If we can reach it, we can disappear completely." As they prepared to run into wilderness that promised safety at the cost of everything familiar, Vanessa realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Fear required believing that other people controlled your fate. But she'd learned to control her own. "Ready?" Marcus asked, shouldering a pack filled with everything they needed to survive. "Ready," she said, and meant it. Behind them, the safe house exploded in flames as their enemies discovered they were too late. Ahead lay forest and freedom and the chance to build something that couldn't be bought or controlled or destroyed. The real fight was just beginning. The truth about Ethan's empire wasn't just criminal. It was a web of abuse that spanned decades and destroyed dozens of lives. The abandoned mining camp sat in a valley so remote that civilization felt like a distant memory. Wooden buildings sagged under decades of weather while equipment rusted into abstract sculptures that nature was slowly reclaiming. But the old communications bunker, built during World War II and forgotten by everyone except historians, still had walls thick enough to block electronic surveillance and rooms deep enough to hide from satellites. Vanessa worked by lamplight, organizing evidence files on tables made from mine carts and scrap wood. The documents she'd gathered from Ethan's office had led to discoveries that made her original accusation seem small. Bank records revealed payments to assassins spanning 15 years. Corporate emails discussed human trafficking like shipping manifests. Government contracts contained clauses that essentially sold national security to the highest bidder. "This isn't just business corruption," she told Marcus as he secured their communications equipment. "This is a system designed to destroy people for profit." Marcus joined her at the makeshift desk, studying financial records that showed payments to politicians, judges, police chiefs, anyone with power to protect Ethan's operations or eliminate threats to them. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a pattern in the transactions. Every payment corresponds to a woman's death or disappearance. He was paying for murder like other people pay for house cleaning. But there's something else. Something bigger. Vanessa pulled out files that had been encrypted so heavily that it had taken their hacker allies days to break the codes. He wasn't working alone. This is part of an international network that trades women like commodities. The documents reveal connections to organizations in 23 countries, all operating under the same basic model. Target vulnerable women. Offer them financial salvation through marriage contracts. Use them for various purposes, then dispose of them when they became inconvenient or learned too much. How many women? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Vanessa's hands shook as she read report after report detailing women who'd vanished from hotels, airports, hospitals, anywhere they might have thought they were safe. They have scouts in every major city, looking for women in desperate situations. Single mothers, immigrants, anyone without strong family connections to notice if they disappeared. Marcus's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Agent Torres. Major breakthrough. Isabella's cooperation led to arrests in 17 countries. But discovered something that changes everything about your case. What does that mean? Vanessa asked. It means the FBI has been monitoring our communications, Marcus replied grimly. And it means Isabella knows more about you specifically than we thought. The implications hit like cold water. If Isabella had been feeding information to foreign governments, she would have investigated everyone in Ethan's life, including details about Vanessa's background that could be used as weapons. Marcus's laptop chimed with an incoming encrypted video call. Agent Torres appeared on screen, but her usual composed expression had been replaced by something that looked like shock. "We need to talk," Torres said without preamble. "There's something about your father that you need to know. My father died in a factory accident when I was 12. "No, he didn't." The words hit like physical blows. Vanessa sank into a camp chair that creaked under her weight, her world shifting in ways that made the Montana wilderness feel stable by comparison. "What are you talking about?" "Your father was Daniel Martinez, an investigative journalist who was getting close to exposing a network of criminal organizations operating in Detroit. He discovered connections between local politicians, business leaders, and international crime syndicates that were using Detroit as a hub for human trafficking. That's impossible. He worked in an auto plant. That was his cover story. The factory accident was staged to protect his family after he received death threats. He's been in witness protection for 23 years. Vanessa stared at the screen, trying to process information that rewrote everything she thought she knew about her life. Where is he? That's complicated. He's been working undercover for the FBI, investigating the same networks you've exposed. The marriage contract with Ethan wasn't random. It was part of a larger operation to gather evidence on international trafficking organizations. You're saying I was bait? You were supposed to be protected. The plan was for you to gather basic information and get out safely. No one expected Ethan to be as dangerous as he turned out to be, or for you to discover evidence of murders and government corruption. Marcus moved closer, his presence steadying as Vanessa's world collapsed and rebuilt itself around truths she'd never imagined. Is my father safe? He's been extracted from his cover position. But Vanessa, there's more. The people who killed Ethan's victims, who are hunting you now, they're the same organization that threatened your father decades ago. This has been personal from the beginning. The mining camp felt smaller suddenly, its walls less protective, its isolation more like a trap than sanctuary. Vanessa realized she'd been fighting a war that started before she was born, using weapons her father had taught her without her knowing. They know, don't they? They know who I really am. They've known from the beginning. The marriage contract was their way of testing whether Daniel Martinez's daughter was as dangerous as her father. Your survival, your intelligence, your refusal to break, it confirmed their worst fears. What would you change if you suddenly had the resources to make a difference? What cause means everything to you? Share your vision below. What happens now? Now you have a choice. Walk away, disappear completely, live quietly under a new identity while other women die. Or finish what your father started 23 years ago. Vanessa looked at Marcus, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. They come too far, learned too much, lost too much to quit now. How do we finish it? Agent Torres smiled for the first time since the call began. By bringing your father out of hiding and combining his evidence with yours. Together, you have enough proof to destroy not just Ethan's organization, but the entire international network. And the risks? If you fail, you'll both be dead within weeks. If you succeed, you'll save thousands of women and bring down criminal organizations that have operated for decades. The choice felt inevitable, like everything in her life had been leading to this moment. In the abandoned mining camp where she'd found safety, Vanessa chose danger instead. Set up the meeting, she said. It's time to meet my father. Outside, mountain wind howled through broken windows, carrying the sound of approaching helicopters. The final battle was about to begin, and this time, it would be fought by a family that had been separated by lies, but united by truth. The war that started with a marriage contract was about to end with a reckoning that would echo across continents. The courtroom became a battlefield where money fought truth, and only one could survive. The federal courthouse in San Francisco looked like a fortress under siege. Metal barriers held back crowds of reporters while helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures waiting for carnage. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension thick enough to cut. Lawyers in $1,000 suits preparing for a trial that would either validate decades of corruption or expose it to the burning light of justice. Vanessa sat in the witness section, no longer the desperate woman who'd signed a marriage contract to save her mother's life. Months of fighting for survival had transformed her into something Ethan's lawyers clearly hadn't expected. A witness who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or discredited. Beside her sat a man she was still learning to recognize as family. Daniel Martinez looked nothing like the factory worker she remembered from childhood. The FBI had given him new features, new mannerisms, knew everything except the eyes that had always seen too much truth for comfort. You ready for this? He asked quietly, his voice carrying an accent that 23 years of hiding hadn't completely erased. Ready as anyone can be for destroying the man who tried to own her. He never owned you. He just convinced you that he did. There's a difference. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Patricia Williams entered, her black robes flowing like wings of justice finally arriving to balance scales that had been tilted by wealth for too long. Williams had a reputation for refusing political pressure and maintaining courtrooms where truth mattered more than bank accounts. The United States versus Ethan Michael Caldwell, the bailiff announced. Charges include treason, conspiracy, murder in the first degree, human trafficking, and racketeering. Ethan entered in an orange jumpsuit that made his pale skin look sickly, his perfect hair unkempt, his confidence replaced by the hunted expression of someone who'd finally run out of money to buy his way out of consequences. He scanned the courtroom like a trapped animal, his eyes stopping when they found Vanessa. For a moment, the old fear tried to resurface. The memory of surveillance cameras, financial threats, casual violence disguised as business decisions. But then she remembered. He had no power over her anymore. He was a caged animal facing justice for crimes that decent people couldn't imagine committing. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the evidence will show that the defendant operated an international criminal enterprise that murdered 17 women, sold classified government secrets to foreign enemies, and profited from human trafficking operations spanning 4 continents. The defense attorney, a man who probably charged more per hour than most people earned in months, stood with the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to buying verdicts. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by foreign agents and disgruntled former associates. The so-called evidence was obtained illegally and fabricated to destroy a successful American businessman. Have you ever had to tell your truth in front of people trying to destroy you? Where do you find strength to speak when everyone's watching? Share below. The first week of testimony established the scope of Ethan's crimes through financial records, recorded conversations, and testimony from federal agents who'd spent years building cases against his organization. But it was the second week that delivered the devastating evidence that would seal his fate. Isabella Cruz took the witness stand wearing the orange jumpsuit of a cooperating witness, her former confidence replaced by the exhausted expression of someone who'd finally stopped running from truth. Mr. Caldwell recruited me specifically to gather intelligence on American technology companies, she testified, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her admissions. I was trained by foreign intelligence services to seduce targets, gather classified information, and facilitate transfers of sensitive technology. And the women who signed marriage contracts with Mr. Caldwell, they were test subjects. The organization wanted to see how much control could be exerted over vulnerable individuals, how completely they could be isolated and manipulated. The marriages were experiments in psychological domination. What happened when these experiments concluded? Isabella's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The subjects were eliminated. Car accidents, suicides, disappearances. I was told it was necessary to protect operational security. Did you participate in planning these murders? Yes. The single word hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Jury members shifted in their seats while spectators gasped audibly. Ethan's face went white as his former lover confirmed what prosecutors had been alleging. Why are you testifying now? Because I met Vanessa Martinez and I realized what we were doing wasn't just criminal, it was evil. She wasn't a test subject or an experiment. She was a human being who deserved better than being treated like property. When Vanessa was called to testify, the courtroom fell completely silent. She walked to the witness stand wearing a simple blue dress that suggested strength without ostentation. Her hair pulled back to show a face that had learned to meet challenges without flinching. Mrs. Caldwell, the prosecutor began, please tell the jury how you met the defendant. I was desperate, Vanessa said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. My mother was dying. I had no money for treatment, and someone offered me a way to save her life. I signed a contract that I thought was about marriage. I discovered it was about ownership. How did Mr. Caldwell treat you during your marriage? Like property he'd purchased. He monitored my every movement, controlled my communications, threatened my mother's life whenever I questioned his authority. He made it clear that I existed solely for his convenience. When did you realize your life was in danger? When I discovered he'd killed other women who'd signed similar contracts. When I learned that every woman who'd been in my position had died exactly 1 month before their contracts expired. What gave you the courage to fight back? Vanessa looked directly at Ethan, meeting his pale eyes without fear, understanding that he wasn't powerful, he was just wealthy. And wealth can be taken away, but strength comes from inside. The defense attorney's cross-examination tried to paint Vanessa as a gold digger who'd fabricated evidence for money, but every question backfired. She answered with facts instead of emotions, evidence instead of accusations, truth instead of the lies Ethan had built his life around. Mrs. Caldwell, isn't it true that you married my client specifically to gain access to his wealth? No, I married your client to save my mother's life. I discovered his wealth came from selling my country's secrets to enemies and murdering women who inconvenienced him. But you've profited considerably from this marriage, haven't you? I've profited by learning that survival requires fighting back when someone tries to own you. I've profited by discovering that justice matters more than money. If you call that profit, then yes, I'm very wealthy now. The courtroom erupted in applause that Judge Williams had to gavel down, but the damage to Ethan's defense was complete. His former victim had become his destroyer, and she'd done it with nothing more powerful than truth. When the jury returned after 3 hours of deliberation, their faces showed the gravity of decisions that would reshape how justice dealt with wealth and power in America. On the charge of treason, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of human trafficking, we find the defendant guilty. Each verdict hit Ethan like a physical blow, his carefully constructed persona crumbling with every word. By the time the jury finished reading 37 guilty verdicts, he looked like a broken mannequin dressed in prison clothes. Judge Williams's sentencing was swift and final. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole, plus additional sentences totaling 400 years for crimes against the United States and its citizens. As bailiffs led Ethan away in chains, he turned one last time toward Vanessa. But instead of the desperate woman he'd tried to control, he saw someone who'd learned to control her own fate. "This isn't over," he mouthed silently. "Yes, it is," she mouthed back. Outside the courthouse, Vanessa stood with Marcus and her father while reporters shouted questions and cameras captured images that would be on front pages around the world. "What's next for you?" a reporter called out. "Building something that lasts," Vanessa replied. "Making sure this never happens to anyone else." The trial was over, but the real work was just beginning. The woman who destroyed a billionaire was about to discover the secret that connected her to him before they ever met. The safe house phone call came at 3 in the morning. Vanessa's hands shook as she answered. "My name is Robert Shun, from the Department of Justice Archives Division. I've been researching your father's case for 20 years. David Williams didn't die in a car accident, Vanessa. He was murdered. The world stopped. Her father, the man her mother said died when she was 2, had been killed? What are you talking about? Your father was Harrison Caldwell's business partner in 1995. They developed the technology that built Ethan's empire together. But Harrison wanted it all. When your father refused to sign over his patents, Harrison had him eliminated and made it look like an accident. Marcus found her sitting on the bathroom floor an hour later, still holding the phone. The marriage contract wasn't random, she whispered. Harrison knew exactly who I was. He wanted Ethan to marry David Williams' daughter and destroy me completely. It was his final revenge against my father. The courthouse steps buzzed with reporters as the jury returned after 2 days of deliberation. Vanessa wore her mother's pearls, the only thing her father had given her mother before he died. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. The world held its breath. Cameras flashed. Marcus squeezed her hand. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant, Ethan Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of human trafficking, guilty. On the charge of espionage, guilty. On all counts, guilty. The courtroom exploded. Ethan's face went white as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. His lawyers shuffled papers desperately, already planning appeals that would never work. Judge Martinez called for order. "Mr. Caldwell, you are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Your assets are to be seized immediately and distributed to your victims through the court-supervised Victim Compensation Fund." Vanessa felt something break inside her. Not pain, but the final chain of fear she'd carried for 2 years. Her father was avenged. Her mother was safe. She was free. But as they walked down the courthouse steps, a reporter called out, "Vanessa, what about Harrison Caldwell? Will you be pressing charges against Ethan's father for your father's murder?" She stopped, turned, faced the cameras one last time. "Harrison Caldwell spent 28 years thinking he'd won by killing my father and stealing his life's work. He thought marrying me to his son would be the perfect final insult. But here's what he didn't understand. My father raised me through my mother's love, through the values she taught me, through the strength she showed me every day. Harrison killed David Williams, but he made me, and I just destroyed his entire family legacy in one wedding gift." The crowd was silent. "As for pressing charges, I don't need to." Harrison Caldwell is 83 years old, watching his son go to prison for life, seeing his empire crumble, knowing that everything he built through murder and theft is being given to the people he hurt. That's a punishment worse than any court could give him. She looked directly into the main camera. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. Sometimes it's becoming everything they try to prevent you from being. 3 months later, Vanessa stood in front of a mirror in a different kind of wedding dress. Simple, white, chosen by her, not bought by a contract. Isabella knocked on the door. Ready. The former spy had become an unexpected friend during the trial. Her testimony about the international network had put 12 other billionaires in prison across 4 countries. Now she worked with Vanessa's foundation, using her skills to track down other trafficking operations. "I still can't believe you're wearing white again," Isabella smiled. "This time it means something different," Vanessa said. "This time's my choice." The beach ceremony was small. Her mother, finally healthy, walked her down the aisle. Marcus waited at the altar, not in a ballroom bought with blood money, but on the shores of Lake Tahoe, with mountains and sky as their witnesses. As they exchanged vows, Vanessa thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, desperate, scared, signing her life away for her mother's medical bills. That woman couldn't have imagined this moment. "Do you, Vanessa Williams, take Marcus Reed to be your husband, in freedom, in choice, and in love?" "I do." And this time, she meant it completely. The reception was held at the community center that would soon become the national headquarters of the Survivors Foundation. The same building where Vanessa had once come looking for help with her mother's bills now hosted celebrations for women who'd found their way out of impossible situations. Former victims share their stories. Lawyers explained new laws inspired by Vanessa's case. Therapists offered healing programs funded by Ethan's seized assets. But the moment that mattered most came when her mother stood to speak. "My daughter taught me that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the doorways to who we're meant to be. David, if you're watching, our little girl didn't just survive, she soared." The applause lasted 5 minutes. Later, as Vanessa and Marcus danced under stars that seemed brighter than any chandelier, she felt complete. Not because a man saved her, but because she'd saved herself. Not because she destroyed her enemies, but because she built something beautiful from the wreckage they'd left behind. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked. "I'm thinking about that scared girl who signed a contract 2 years ago. I wish I could tell her that signing that paper wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of everything she never dared to dream." Have you ever been through something so terrible that you couldn't imagine surviving it? Have you discovered that your worst moment was actually preparing you for your greatest victory? Tell me in the comments. What would you say to your past self if you could go back? The girl from Detroit who signed a contract to save her family became the woman who saved herself and countless others. 1 year after the wedding that changed everything, Vanessa stood in front of a brand new building in downtown Detroit. The brass plaque by the entrance read, "The David Williams Center for Survivor Empowerment," founded by the Survivors Foundation. Her mother stood beside her, holding the ceremonial scissors. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered, cutting the ribbon as cameras flashed and survivors cheered. The center wasn't just a building, it was a revolution. Legal aid for women trapped in controlling relationships. job training for those who'd never been allowed to work, therapy for minds that had been broken and needed healing, housing for people with nowhere else to go. But most importantly, it was proof that monsters could be defeated. "How does it feel?" a reporter asked Vanessa. "To know you created something that will help people for generations?" Vanessa looked at the faces around her. Women who'd been trafficked, men who'd been abused, children who'd been exploited. All of them now free, now fighting, now winning. "It feels like my father's death finally means something," she said. Harrison Caldwell killed him to steal his technology and build an empire of abuse. We took that same technology, sold it, and used every penny to build an empire of healing. His evil created this good. That's justice. Inside the center, former victims now worked as counselors, lawyers, and advocates. The reception desk was staffed by Maria Santos, who'd escaped from one of Ethan's contract marriage schemes after seeing Vanessa's story on the news. 6 women called this morning, Maria told Vanessa. All of them said they found courage because they saw what you did. 3 have already left their abusers. The other 3 are planning their escapes. That afternoon, Vanessa met with a congressional committee that was drafting new federal laws inspired by her case. The Vanessa Williams Act would make contract marriages illegal, require background checks for marriage brokers, and create federal funding for survivor services. "Your courage to speak truth to power has literally changed the law," Congressman Davies told her. "How does it feel to know that no other woman will be trapped the way you were?" "It feels like freedom is contagious," Vanessa replied. "When one person refuses to stay broken, it gives others permission to heal too." That evening, she returned to the penthouse she now shared with Marcus. Not the sterile monument to wealth where Ethan had tried to own her, but a warm home filled with books, laughter, and plants that grew toward windows she controlled. Marcus was cooking dinner, something Ethan had never done for her in 2 years of marriage. Real partnership looked nothing like the control she'd mistaken for love. "How was your day, Mrs. Reed?" he asked, kissing her forehead. "Perfect. Terrifying. Life-changing. Normal." She laughed. "I still can't believe this is my life now." "What part? Running a national foundation, changing federal laws, or being married to a devastatingly handsome man who makes excellent pasta?" "All of it. 2 years ago, I was signing my life away to pay medical bills. Now I'm helping other people rewrite their stories entirely." Over dinner, they planned their next move. The foundation was expanding internationally. Isabella had identified trafficking networks in 12 countries that used the same contract marriage schemes Ethan had perfected. Governments were asking Vanessa to testify before the United Nations. "Are you ready to take this global?" Marcus asked. "I think my father would want his technology to free people everywhere, not just in America." Harrison Caldwell used it to abuse people on 4 continents. "We should use it to heal people on all 7. Later that night, as they lay in bed talking about dreams that were becoming reality, Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I saw your story. I am 15. My parents are trying to marry me to a man who says he'll pay our family's debts. I don't want to be like you were. I want to be like you became. What do I do?" Vanessa showed Marcus the message. "This is why we do this work." She typed back, "You call this number right now, 1-800-SURVIVOR. Tell them Vanessa sent you. You have people who will fight for you. You're not alone. You are not powerless, and you are worth fighting for." The response came back immediately. "Thank you for showing me that saying no is possible." And that, Vanessa told Marcus, is how the world changes. One person at a time, finding the courage to say no more. 6 months later, Vanessa stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly, addressing delegates from 193 countries. Behind her, a presentation showed the global reach of trafficking networks that used marriage contracts to abuse vulnerable people. "My story began with desperation and a signature on a contract I didn't understand," she told the world leaders. "It ended with justice and laws that will protect people I'll never meet. But between that signature and this speech, I learned the most important lesson of my life. We're not victims of our circumstances. We are architects of our responses." The standing ovation lasted 8 minutes. The final slide of her presentation showed a photograph taken that morning. Hundreds of survivors from around the world standing together outside the United Nations building, holding signs that read, "Healed, free, fighting, surviving, thriving." These are the faces of revolution, Vanessa said. These are the people who refuse to stay broken. This is what happens when one person's courage gives permission for others to find their own. As she left the podium, the Secretary General shook her hand. "You've given the world something precious, Mrs. Reed. You've proven that justice is possible." That night, from her hotel room in New York, Vanessa video called the Detroit Center. The staff was working late, helping a family that had just escaped from traffickers. "How are our newest survivors doing?" she asked. "They're free," came the answer. "And tomorrow, they start building their new lives." Vanessa smiled, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere in those lights were people trapped in situations like hers had been. But also in those lights were people finding courage, making calls, taking first steps toward freedom. The girl who'd signed a contract to survive had become the woman who taught the world that survival wasn't enough. Everyone deserved the chance to soar. What would you build if you turned your worst experience into your greatest purpose? How would you use your pain to heal others? Share your vision in the comments below. And remember, if this story inspired you, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to let their circumstances define their destinies. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over. It's just beginning. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's becoming so powerful, so healed, so unstoppable that they realize destroying you was the biggest mistake they ever made. Your turn, warriors. What's your story going to be?